in Greece. And then more recently, last fall during Hurricane Maria, Facebook had, I would say, a more comprehensive response. And some of the new things that we've put into our program is really committing people on the ground for the first time. So during Hurricane Maria, we had a number of our engineers that deployed out with the NetHope teams to provide connectivity. And we have since then internally, we've formalized the program. It's much more structured in terms of our decisions to activate certain resources when a crisis strikes. We work closely with our global security operations team, and we have one of our colleagues from that team here with us today. We have put together an internal roster of about 140 Facebook volunteers who have the technical skills to go out and deploy this kind of connectivity. And they also tend to have the sort of mental and physical makeup that allows them to go into austere environments or with austere conditions. Many of those come from our Facebook Vets group, which is a group of about 1,300 people within our employee base. So it's been a sort of a nice path that we've been on. We've been on that path together with NetHope over the last few years. We realize there's a lot more that we can do together. There's a lot of work that's being done on the product side as well as on the data side, which helps to bring to life some of this and really is complementary work. So with that in mind, I will turn it over to Annette, who will give you an update on one of those products. And it's all yours.
Thank you, Chris.
You bet.
Hello and good morning. It was just before 3 p.m. on a Friday afternoon in March 2014 when an earthquake hit just off the east coast of Japan. And its power was so strong that it actually shifted the position of the Earth on its axis. And there was a tsunami that resulted of that, and at its peak, it reached more than 40 meters. The devastation was enormous, and it included actually the meltdown of 3 reactors of the nuclear power plant in Fukushima. And people's immediate reaction in the aftermath was actually to turn to search for their loved ones and search for information. And many of them used Facebook, and they turned to Facebook to connect with their loved ones and find out what was happening in the crisis area. And it's like, taken from their own personal experience, some of the engineers from Facebook in Japan actually built a simple message board, just allow people to connect to families and friends and get information to the areas that were affected. And this simple message board then evolved into a product throughout 2014. And this was Safety Check. So Safety Check for Facebook has since its launch helped millions of people to connect to their families and friends, to areas that are impacted. And it helps to bring the help that is needed to the right places. Safety Check is a very simple way to just tell friends and family that you're safe or to ask for support. And now we're bringing Safety Check into workplace. So to help organizations to keep their work communities safe. What is Workplace? Workplace is the private community that you can use, having your own private Facebook community inside your organization. So it's an enterprise product from Facebook. It looks and feels like Facebook, but it's actually separate and secure. It's completely separated from Facebook, specifically for your organization. It connects the entire organization, so from your head office to the field office to every single person on the ground, giving everyone a voice, connecting people throughout the organization and helping you in the organization, helping the teams to get work done faster, better, and more efficiently. And many of you here in the room are using it every day already. So Safety Check was one of the top requested products, actually, or features to be brought into Workplace. And we're super excited that actually, since 3 weeks ago, we now have Safety Check on Workplace. I truly hope you will never need to use it, but if you do, it's now available. And Delta Airlines had early access to Safety Check. They deployed it globally to actually help continue their efforts to keep their people safe. And it's already proved its value in the most recent Hurricane Florence, and they used it also with the earthquake in Hokkaido in Japan very recently. Delta Airlines chose Safety Check because it was simple, it's reliable, and it meets the people where they are, right on the ground on their mobile phones. I would love to show you just a very quick video on why we built it and how we built it.
Safety Check and crisis response is extremely important to Facebook, primarily because during the times of crisis, people tend to turn to Facebook to get information about their loved ones. It's been used by millions of people since 2014 when it was launched. And just this year, more than 2,000 crises have been handled through the Safety Check program. It is important to bring this type of a product into a work product, which is what Workplace is.
We got a lot of feedback from both our security team as well as companies on Workplace who told us about the difficulty of managing crisis response for an organization.
The way that we were doing this before was utilizing other third-party external programs, and really as simple as things like trying to call people, utilizing Word documents to try and understand where people were. It was really a messy process that would sometimes take days to complete, and with the new Safety Check for Workplace product, it takes hours, if not minutes, to complete that entire process now.
Our goal with Workplace is to help companies and organizations build meaningful communities in the work environment. And part of that is knowing where your employees are, and are they okay, and are they safe in a time of crisis.
We enable companies to quickly spread awareness about a crisis as it unfolds by allowing them to create their own safety checks. We quickly connect the people who need help with the people who can provide help at your company. This is done through allowing people to mark themselves as safe or request assistance. We hope that this product will help any work community, big or small, better respond to crises and help keep their community safe.
And I kept the last bit, or the best bit to last. Workplace is actually donated free of charge to all registered nonprofits and educational staff, including Safety Check, to help you keep your communities, your people safe. And with that, I'll hand over to Laura. Thank you.
Thank you. So you heard from Chris about the power of our partnerships, Annette about the power of our products, and I'm here last but not least to tell you about a key important third part to how Facebook contributes to crisis response, which is data. Now this feels like an important discussion to be having here on this stage in Ireland, because my great-grandfather is from a town called Ballyhonus in County Mayo. And while generations ago this was a white working-class town, which had really only Irish people living in it, nowadays, this has become a sanctuary city for Syrian refugees. I also grew up in the state of Pennsylvania, which has had its own recent tragedies with gun violence. And I bring up these personal stories not to provoke sadness, but to underscore the point that given the combined impacts of climate change, globalization, and civil unrest, no matter where you live, no matter what your story, no matter where you grew up, crisis touches us all. And as a result, we need to bring as many tools as we can to the fore to be able to effectively respond. And I think data is one of the most indispensable tools that we can now bring to the table to more effectively respond to crises around the world. I manage the Data for Good portfolio at Facebook, and one of our most important products is called Disaster Maps. Disaster Maps shares privacy-preserving insights from the Facebook platform with nonprofits and multilaterals working in disaster response. Now, what this means is that when people use Facebook on their mobile phones with location services turned on, we're able to aggregate, smooth, and anonymize that information and share it with nonprofits to tell them about how communities are evacuating. We can tell them whether or not people are able to get on Facebook at all, which is a very good proxy for whether or not telecommunications are up or down. We're also able to see whether or not power is up or down, and if communities have marked themselves safe. And what's increasingly exciting about this work is that we're now working with 30 nonprofits, of which NetHope is a key partner, to do this work in real time. This is no longer theoretical work. We're doing this in real time to more effectively respond to disasters across the world. And I'll walk through just a few examples now. When Hurricane Maria ravaged the island of Puerto Rico late last year, we worked with NetHope and the American Red Cross in multiple ways using Facebook data. We were able to see that 2 days before Maria struck, use of Facebook on the island was about what we expected it to be. However, 3 weeks after Maria, there was, of course, a sharp decline in use of Facebook because of the combined impact to the electrical grid and telecommunications. And this remained persistent 8 weeks after Maria. Now, why is this information important and how could it be used? In this case, we used it in several ways. In partnership with NetHope and the American Red Cross, we deployed over 100 Wi-Fi hotspots to locations around the island of Puerto Rico, and Facebook network coverage data told NetHope and the American Red Cross where those sites were needed most. NetHope also used the penetration of Facebook users on the island to launch an Information as Aid campaign, targeting people on the island of Puerto Rico with the information they needed via Facebook. They also used citizen reporters to tell the stories of affected communities and used it as a tool to reach the Puerto Rican diaspora, creating one of the fastest growing pages in Facebook history that reached over 1.5 million users. Jumping to another example, recently when there was a volcanic eruption in Guatemala, network coverage data was used again. In this case, NetHope was able to use our network coverage data to deploy Wi-Fi hotspots to shelters and other areas that needed internet, serving over 7,000 people who were affected by the eruption. Another partner of ours named UNICEF, who you may know, also used our network coverage data because they had no idea if anyone could be reached with an online message. So they reached out to us and they said, is anyone able to get online right now? And we said, actually, yes, this is our network coverage map of 2G coverage in the areas affected by the eruption on the left. And they said, great, because we have a tool called UReport, which is built entirely on Facebook Messenger, and we want to be able to send messages to youth affected by the eruption. And that's exactly what they did. And because we were able to tell them that they could use online tools, they reached thousands more youth with messages than they originally anticipated they could. This was information about when youth could go back to school, where they could seek shelter, and where they could get health services if they needed. Last but not least, a more recent example is that there were a number of wildfires this summer in the state of California. And we worked with another of our dear partners, Direct Relief, with whom I'm doing a panel later on today at 4:15. Plug for that if you want to become a Disaster Maps partner. And we worked with Direct Relief in a different way. So Direct Relief works with health systems. And they really care about where to send supplies because in times of crises, supplies are scarce and you need to distribute them to the locations that need them most. Well, in this case, they used real-time population density maps. This is one pulled from Disaster Maps on the left to show how evacuations were proceeding. And because Direct Relief updates where they send respiratory masks on a daily basis, they were able to use our daily location density maps to send their respiratory masks to the places that needed them the most. Now, I use these three examples to show that I believe that social media data has an opportunity to impact the way disasters are responded to in many regions of the world. And the examples I gave here are not exhaustive. We used social media data in response to the Kerala floods, which displaced over 1 million people. We're using it now to respond to the earthquake in Sulawesi. So I believe it can be used in many regions of the world in disaster response of many different types. And what this underscores for me is what William Gibson said, is that the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. And so I'd like to invite all of you to be part of distributing more evenly the future of disaster response so that we can reach communities more effectively and save lives. Thank you.
We're good.
Yeah. Thank you, Gonzalo.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Pleasure to work with this team. The process of beginning to understand how we take the data from the social networks that we put in billions of pockets has not been easy. And certainly While the presentation may make it look polished and simple, the process of getting there has required an enormous amount of work from the Facebook team and from some of our own partners. I really thank you for the process and the opportunity to work with this data. Data is getting ever larger and more complex, and the process of beginning to make sense out of what's happening in this world often requires us to use data sets that get beyond the capacities of the things that we have in our own organizations. Open data is a great example of that, and many of the things that we work on require processing power, storage that go far beyond what we can normally do. I first met Jed Sunwall from Amazon when I was working at the World Bank on a project on open data for resilience. We were writing a book on how, like not just what we should do with open data, but how. And Jed made just a minor miracle happen with making about 40 years of Landsat satellite imagery available, processed it, and got it stored and made it freely available to all of us to use for crisis response. I'd like to introduce Jed, old friend and a person who has been a key element in the data ecosystem that we're putting together for the humanitarian system.
Thank you, John. Thanks so much. Thank you all. Thank you. It's really an honor to be here. It's been great talking to some of you over the past day, just got in yesterday, about what you're doing, and it really is an honor to be with you. So it's funny, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do with open data and big data, but I'm going to actually focus on small data for most of my discussions. So when I was asked to come speak, I asked my colleague at Amazon, what should I talk about? And it was Lauren Stovall. I don't know if you know, she's here. So I've never been in NetHope. What should I talk about? She said, well, be prescriptive. Like, give people something they can use. And so I'm going to give some advice that I gave a few years ago and I got yelled at for, but I'm going to do it again. So my first bit of advice is use Excel. If you want to create a data-driven organization, Excel is a really powerful tool. In the grand scheme of things, in the grand scheme of human history, the idea that all of us have access to these ledgers that we can manipulate and sort and filter and do stuff with is pretty remarkable. I love that William Gibson quote, by the way, that the idea that the future's already here, but it's not evenly distributed. Excel's pretty evenly distributed. You all probably have it, and you probably know how to use it. And so actually my first bit, indulge in spreadsheets. If you're like me, you might spend a lot of your time thinking, your job is you're in meetings all the time, you're writing emails all the time. For me, it feels kind of like a luxury when I can get my hands on a spreadsheet and just mess around with data and get my hands dirty with it. It's always time well spent. And if you want to develop a data-driven organization and you're not actually working with data yourself, give it a try. And I'll tell the story, why I got yelled at for giving this advice before. So it was, somebody asked me, it was about open government data, and somebody's saying, where do you start? And I said basically what I just said right now. I said, use Excel. And when the audience started asking questions, somebody got up and they yelled at me. They're like, how dare you? We live in a world now where we can work with, petabytes of data and linked data and all these big data tools and Hadoop. And the thing is that this person is totally right. This is true. I think that's a big theme of this event is that we have so much capacity available to us. And what the point they're making, it's shameful that you're telling people to use Excel at this point. But I still believe it's true. I think we should take advantage of the tools that you have available to you. And I think if you want to make your organization more data-driven, it's just important to make sure that data is a part of what you do all the time. Now, there's another tool that we all have access to when working with data, and that's language. I really recommend talking about data. Oftentimes, people will be under the assumption that they want to become a data-driven organization, so they need a dashboard, or they need a data person who's going to get the data and then tell them about the data, and then they'll know everything they need to know. That it doesn't always work out that way. Ultimately, if you're trying to communicate something with data, it's going to come down to a statement. It'll be a sentence. It'll be a statement about a trend or about a decision that you have to make. And so I highly recommend talking about data. And in fact, there's this idea that I really like, that sometimes the best infographic is a sentence. You can twist yourself into knots and spend a lot of time coming up with a really cool dashboard or a really cool data visualization. I love dashboards. I love visualizations. They're important. But oftentimes, what you're really trying to get to is a sentence. So take it down to, distill it to what's necessary. Now, Amazon is a kind of peculiar company. We pride ourselves on doing things a little bit differently within our organization. And in fact, if you're interested in learning more about sort of how we work, my colleague Doug Van Dyke, who's here, at 2 o'clock today, he'll be giving a session on what's called working backwards, how we do stuff at Amazon. But one thing, this actually comes out in the news sometimes. Somebody will write a story about it, how we don't use PowerPoint. It's this weird thing at Amazon. So if you ever have a meeting where somebody's going to propose an idea or a new initiative, they're not going to show up with a slide deck and do what I'm doing right now and stand up and present the slides. What they're going to do is they're going to write a narrative, what we call a narrative, a 6-page narrative. And you're going to use words and sentences and paragraphs, and you're going to explain what you're trying to do, and everybody's going to read it. And so the first part of the meeting, everybody sits down silently and reads, for about 10 minutes or something like that, however long it takes, and then you have the discussion. And it's a really good exercise because it requires you to use language and it requires you to put a lot of thought into what you're proposing, and it's a very effective way to get a lot of feedback on your ideas from a lot of people. Now, the one thing that's remarkable about these narratives, and I've read a lot of them, I've been at Amazon for a while, so they always include data. So if you write a narrative and you present some sort of idea and there's no evidence in it, there's sort of like no evidence backing up what you're trying to do or why you should do it, you're going to get a lot of pushback. It's not going to go very far, and people are going to be very skeptical of it. And my point here is that Amazon is definitely a data-driven organization, but the way that it is we're always expecting data. Every decision that we make, everything that we say or report on about what we're doing, it's expected to come with data to back it up, and that's a cultural thing that happens. And so, along these same lines of talking about data, one of the best things you can do is just ask follow-up questions. Actually be curious about data. When somebody presents something to you, ask them a little bit more about, where did you get the data from? How did you do the analysis? Things like that. Having conversations about data is so important. Now, there's a nonprofit that does this really well, really effectively that I really admire. They're called GetCalFresh. So GetCalFresh is a startup. Well, it's like a startup nonprofit, but they came out of Code for America. And I don't know if you don't know what Code for America is. It's a nonprofit in the United States that they do really remarkable work helping state and local governments take better advantage of technology and the web generally to provide better citizen services. And this may come as no surprise to a lot of you, but a lot of people in marginalized communities who are in need, they have to go through very cumbersome processes just to apply for the benefits that they're eligible for. And they might not have the time to deal with the application forms. They might not have the level of literacy required to fill out the application forms. And so what GetCalFresh, what their mission is, they want anybody to be able to apply for food stamps in 10 minutes. They want to make it really easy. And what's remarkable about what they've done is that they instrument everything that they do. So when somebody goes through the GetCalFresh flow to apply for benefits, they can see if the person is denied of the benefits, they can see if they drop out of the workflow, and then based on that data, they can do better user testing and iterate on their product to make sure that they're providing a better service to people. And what you're seeing here in this photo is them going out into the field and actually doing user testing, but using data that they've gathered from their tool, just basic web analytics. And using data from that to inform more customer discussions so they can learn how to build a better product. And it's small things like this, small conversations about data that can move the needle and really help you produce a better product and serve people more effectively. Also, develop data literacy within your organization. This is a widespread issue. So again, at this conference, you're going to hear about all these amazing technologies that are available to people now. And it's wonderful, and the technology is accelerating extremely rapidly, but getting workforces everywhere to sort of keep up with that pace is a huge challenge. This is happening all over the world, in every sector. The thing is, if you think that a tool's going to emerge that's just going to come and solve your missions problem, you might be waiting forever. What you're doing might be too esoteric, for somebody to build a tool to help you with. So one thing that you really need to be doing that I really recommend is finding ways that if you have people within your organization that are willing to and have the time and have the capacity to take advantage of all of the free learning materials that are out there right now to learn statistics and to learn about new open source tools and other ways that you can work with data. One example of this that I really like is from the University of Adolfo Ibáñez in Santiago, where they've created like an executive education program focusing on public servants and helping them level up in terms of their data literacy skills and statistics skills. And there are two things that I really like about this program. The first is that it gives them a credential, right? So now it's a paid thing, but they give discounts to public servants. So this one isn't free, even though there are a lot of free resources out there, but it gives them a credential. So this is a nice program because the people who go into it, they get something they can use for their career and for career advancement. So that's a really nice thing. But the other thing, and this is what I really hope to see more of in the future, is that it's focused specifically on public servants. And magic really happens when you get somebody who has a specific domain expertise that's maybe somewhat esoteric. In their case, they have a really good understanding of policy making, of governance in Chile, of how the Chilean political processes work. You get these people, and then you put statistical skills on top of that and big data analysis skills on top of that. These are really powerful people, and then they're going to be able to do their jobs much, much more effectively. But the beauty is that they have that overlap and that intersection of their passion and their deep expertise in one region, but they also have the data skills, which is really wonderful. Now, I also recommend sharing data. So I should probably explain a little bit more about what I do. I know John gave a nice introduction. So I run the Open Data Program at AWS, and our objective is to help customers who have lots of data that they want to share publicly, to help them understand how to use the cloud to do that. And it can be really powerful because when you share data in the cloud, people can work with it at really any volume without having to download it or acquire it themselves. I'm not going to talk a lot about what I do, but we do have a website you can go to. It's just opendata.aws, and you can learn about what people are doing by sharing data in the cloud. Now, I've spoken with a lot of you. A lot of you work with very sensitive populations. You work with very sensitive data, the kind of stuff that you definitely don't want to open, and I'm definitely not recommending opening up sensitive data. But what I do recommend is thinking a little bit about if you can expand the circle within your organization or among your stakeholders of people who can work with the data that you have. And one of the main reasons for this is that when you expand the audience of who can see your data and who can work with it, you can generate more diversity of who's working with your data. And diversity is so important here because you get people with different backgrounds, different skill sets, different opinions, different biases to look at data. They're going to see different things and they're going to find different insights. And it can really help maximize the value of the data and get as much value out of the data as is possible. Another trend, though, that we're seeing that I'm really excited about are there are nonprofits that are emerging that their whole reason to exist is to share data and to expand access to data. One of these that I really love is OpenAQ. So AQ stands for air quality. Their objective is to aggregate air quality data from all over the world, make it available in standardized formats for people to work with in the cloud. And their mission is really beautiful. What they're trying to do is enable previously impossible science. And the way they're doing this is by gathering data that just nobody else could ever get together in one place and making it really easy to work with in one place. And based on that, they're hoping to motivate this research, and so that this research will yield some sort of insight into interventions that we can take, whether they're policy interventions or other things that we can do to reduce air pollution and what they call air inequality. Now, another good example of how this is some work that we've done with NOAA, so with the Weather Administration in the United States. Recently, this is like about a month ago, Nature published this paper, or some ornithologists at Cornell published this paper that had this line in it that I just absolutely love, because so they say recently NOAA and AWS made available one of the largest data sets describing animal movement ever compiled. And I read this, I was like, that's weird. I wasn't aware of that. And they're like, it's the NextRad weather radar archive. So it is true, we did work with NOAA to open up about 25 years of weather radar data, which we thought, this is really great. It's going to be useful for climate research. It's going to be used for weather research and all sorts of environmental things. And that's how we saw it. And so this is what radar data normally looks like. You can measure stuff in the atmosphere. Usually it's precipitation, hurricanes, for instance, what you're seeing here on the left. What you're seeing on the right, is this animating? Oh no, did it animate before? Yeah. Watch it again. So there's that ring pattern there. That's a signature of a bird flock waking up in the morning. So what's going on is there are birds on the ground and they're swirling up into the atmosphere. And so it turns out, yeah, it's true. We opened up the largest data set of like animal migration like ever compiled. It's national weather radar data. And so these ornithologists were able to look at this data and track bird migration patterns at a continental scale for the first time ever. They all knew, and it's what's remarkable about this is that a lot of these ornithologists knew that this data existed. They knew they could see birds in radar data, but they just couldn't get it before. It was really hard to get. So when it was available in the cloud, we were able to sort of open up this door and really lower the cost of research for them and allow them to ask a lot more questions of this data and find out interesting things. And the results have been really gratifying. But this again just sort of underscores the point that I'm trying to make, is that when you're able to share data and sort of expand the circle of people who can work with data, you're going to get a greater diversity of viewpoints and insights out of it. Along these same lines, it's really important to get data into the field and also to get data out of the field. Right now, one of the beauties of the cloud is that anywhere in the world, if you have connectivity, you have access to this tremendous amount of computing power. Now, as we've heard, talking about cases like disaster response where connectivity is wiped out, or if you're just somewhere remote where there isn't a lot of connectivity, it's not always possible. So we actually have a device that's called the Snowball Edge, which is really cool. And I always love getting to show a slide where I can actually show one of our products because the cloud doesn't photograph very well. So now you've got this like beautiful gray box. Now, it's a really awesome thing. It's super rugged. You can check it on a plane. If the bag checkers toss it around, nothing's going to happen to it. It's extremely rugged. You can store 100 terabytes of data on there. To put that in perspective, to download 1 terabyte, if you're lucky, will take you about 2 days over a good broadband connection. So you can put a massive amount of data on this thing, and it's got a really powerful computer on it as well. And tomorrow afternoon, Esri is going to give a presentation about this, a pilot that we did with We Robotics and Esri and Drone Deploy, where they took a Snowball Edge out into the field. They took it out to Peru, very remote, flew some drones to gather imagery, got it onto the Snowball Edge and processed it using Esri software, and also worked with the entire OpenStreetMap database that was preloaded on the Edge. So you're able to get the entire global OpenStreetMap database out into the field for them to work with, to learn from, and then to actually make edits to on the Snowball Edge, and then they're able to just send it back. They can fly back to somewhere they have greater connectivity and share that data right back out. It's a super cool story, and just a good example of how the technology and everything that we're building and that's available to you today. It's not just there are a lot of smart people and a lot of good people working really hard on figuring out how to get this stuff out as remotely as possible, which is obviously critical for humanitarian response. Now, so for my final bit of advice, I had a hard time coming up with sort of like how to phrase this one. I wanted to be, this is coming from a sort of negative place. I'm going to warn you all right now. So the idea being that like, don't let data become your boss. Now, there's always a peril if you become fixated on data, you can emphasize it too much, you can focus on the numbers too much. Data is only going to take you so far, and bad things can happen if you let it go too far. So there's one thing that inspired me to talk about this was there's a podcast that I listened to recently. The podcast is called Reply All. It's very good. It's always good. But they did a 2-part series about CompStat, which some of you may have heard of CompStat, but this is a program that the New York City Police Department started in, I think it's the late 70s or early 80s. Crime rate was like out of control in New York City at the time. And in a nutshell, what the program was, they started talking about data. The police department actually started talking about the crime rate, and they got precinct chiefs in a room every week, and they said, what's the crime rate in your precinct? What are you doing about it? And they would ask follow-up questions. And voila, suddenly the crime rate really started going down because people were being held accountable based on data. Now, so it's a good story. It's a success story in a lot of ways, but they took it too far. And so eventually what ended up happening is you'd have some people in the police department that were more worried about the crime rate than actually what their job was, right? So they became obsessed with the number and figuring out how to get the number to keep going down, even if that wasn't necessarily aligned with their mission. So this is dangerous. You can't instrument everything and you can't measure everything. I think everybody in this room understands that, but it's important to not let data become the boss. This idea, though, of sort of remembering who your customer is, this is another very Amazonian thing. So there's a quote from Jeff Bezos from just a few weeks ago. I think he was at the Economic Club in DC talking about the Day One Foundation. So this is a new philanthropic effort. And one of the first things he's going to do is build all these Montessori schools in low-income areas. And he made the point in this presentation, he's like, our customer in these schools is the student. And that's not always obvious to people, you know, who your customer is. And so his case, he's like, look, here's what we're doing. The customer is the student, and we're going to focus on these kids and help the kids. It's not the parents, it's not the teachers, it's not the administrators. But what I really love about this quote is that he shares this insight that it's just always worth remembering, is that you can be scientific where you can. Use data where you can. It will take you so far. But you also have to use your heart and intuition. That's what you're here for. And my final thought, as you think about, you know, ways to make your organization more data-driven, is to remember yourself, right? So data needs you. It is absolutely true that we live in a world now where we have so much capacity at our fingertips and so much power. But all of those things are worthless if you don't bring your heart and your mission to it. So it's not some big data tool is not going to come and solve your mission. It's you. And I thank you very much for all the work that you're doing. And thank you for being with me today.
Jed, I have to tell you that we're actually taking your advice to heart. We are doing spreadsheets like crazy at NetHope, so hopefully, good points. I am delighted to introduce Justin Spellhaug. He is with Microsoft, and he's with Microsoft's Tech for Social Impact group. Some of you maybe thought Lauren was going to come up here and introduce him, but I actually known Justin for quite some time. We worked actually pretty closely together at Microsoft. We worked in a group called the Unlimited Potential Group. Not sure if many of you remember that. We actually tried to build some products that was targeting the developing world and the economic realities in Southeast Asia and other places. We had a product called FlexGo. Anyone remember FlexGo? As I thought. We did do a successful product that was called Windows Multipoint Server. Anyone know Windows Multipoint Server? Yeah, a couple of people, see? But that group has had its slight limitations. They actually, in 2009, we shut down the group, and we decided not to solve the world's problem with custom technology. It's delightful to know that Justin is now heading up the Tech for Social Impact group, where he's now backed by the core business of Microsoft and all the power that represents, and to help the group that's assembled here today. So with that, Justin.
Great, thank you. All right. Let's get it moving this morning. I want to make sure everybody's awake. So if you were up early or stayed up late to watch the midterm elections, whether you're American or not, stand up and shake it out. Stand up and shake it out. There we go. Now, if you're on my team and you sent me a post at 1 a.m. for a viewing party, stay standing. Will, thank you. You can stay standing. Yeah. Good. I think we're going to see some creative tax returns coming through based on that election result. No, thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. Just a year ago, I was up here with Lauren when we had launched the Tech for Social Impact organization at Microsoft, and we communicated that we were really focused on three things uniquely. The first was bringing together all of the charitable and philanthropic work that we were doing with the NGO sector, combining that with our commercial work so that we could support organizations on an end-to-end basis and move, frankly, from what was tactical relationships many times to really strategic, deep relationships with organizations through this room and around the world. We communicated that we wanted to have a deep innovation agenda, and we hired Eric Arnold, who many of you know, to lead that innovation agenda and to build solutions across all three of our clouds, from modern workplace to Azure to Dynamics, and we'll talk more about that today. And we said that we needed to create a true social business that reinvested every penny of the incremental revenue that we generate or profit that we generate back into more technology, more solutions, more capacity, more cash grants for this sector. Now, we also communicated that we had 4 core priorities that we would deliver in year 1. More nonprofit offers, making it easier to do business, solutions, as well as some thought leadership. I wouldn't say that we've accomplished everything that we've wanted to accomplish in year 1, but we have made some progress. On the commercial side, we introduced new things like an enterprise agreement and a cloud solution provider model to make it easier to purchase technology. We invested in expanding the team by 3x to support the top 1,000 nonprofit organizations directly, one-to-one, across the world. We invested in new technologies from Power BI to Azure Foundation Packs. But the thing I like about this list is the balance that we've had on the philanthropic side. You'll see there that we've given over $1.6 billion last year in cash, in cloud, and in on-prem technology to over 200,000 organizations. We took some of that incremental reinvestment and we applied it and announced at the United Nations General Assembly that we would invest in UNICEF and UNHCR to create platforms to help refugees, internally displaced people, and children on the move have access to education and economic opportunity. And we've invested in AI and AI for good, and specifically AI for humanitarian action to start to drive some thought leadership. But this is not really our total ambition in terms of the social change that we want to create with the platform that we have, or with this room, partners in this room and organizations in this room. I use this slide to describe the bigger picture that we're after. On one hand of the slide, you have digital transformation, and this is working with organizations like you who are on the front line of social change and helping you use technology in a way that advances your mission. Deeply investing in new technology platforms built by and built with and built for this sector, and we're going to talk about one of those platforms here in a moment. We're also investing in digital inclusion. There are millions of people, in fact billions of people around the world who are not participating in the digital economy, do not have access to the jobs that are better paying in the digital economy, whether they're in inner city New York or they're in the northeast corner of Kenya in the Kakuma camp. We're investing in technologies and platforms and programs to bring them into the digital economy and give them access to the jobs and economic opportunities they deserve. We have over 100,000 employees, so that's the third piece of this, and that's about activating our employees to volunteer with your organizations, to give more to your organizations. Last year, our employee plus our company match donated over $150 million to this sector, and we're well on track for that again this year. And then finally, at the core of all of this, as you bring your data into the cloud, we need to be earning your trust every single day and building on that trust every single day. So I thought the topic that we'd spend time on here were 3. They're pretty hot topics over the last couple of days. One is, what are we doing to specifically build trust? Second, what are we doing in AI? And third, what new platforms are we considering for this sector, and how are we engineering new technology for the sector? So that's where we'll take the conversation. Let's start with trust, and let's start with what we've all been busy on here. 3 key areas that we focus on in the company. One is privacy and security, which you know, but the second or the third key area is really focusing on ethics and the new ethics that we need to consider as we build AI technologies and build them in a responsible and effective way for society. We'll talk about each of these, and the area that we've been spending a lot of time in this room on is privacy. With the new GDPR regulations that were released this year, I know you've been busy and we have been busy ensuring that our technology really responds to those regulations in an effective way. In the last several months, we've been spending lots of time on our operations, ensuring that our third-party vendors, as an example, are following these standards, ensuring that we can respond in 72 hours if there is a breach. But one thing that we've been focusing on is privacy for everyone, not just for those that live in Europe. If you are not a European living in Europe, would you raise your hand? If you take your hand down, well, keep your hands up. Keep your hands up. Now, if you don't care about your personal privacy, take your hand down. Of course, everybody cares about their personal privacy, and that's why we invested in ensuring that these GDPR standards and regulations not only applied to citizens in Europe, but applied to everybody in every corner of the world. And it turns out that when you look at the data and we compare Europeans to US citizens as an example, there's a higher proportion of folks in the US accessing through our GDPR tools their profiles, their informations to update and adjust that. We know that this resonates and privacy is important for every single person on the planet. The second area that we've been focusing on is cybersecurity. And while we've been investing in lots of different technology, we've also been investing in operations. First, with our Threat Intelligence Center that looks at 6 trillion signals each day to identify new threat vectors. Second, our Cyber Defense and Operations Center. And third, our Digital Crimes Unit. And we've been investing pretty heavily in our Digital Crimes Unit. And it's important for you to know that if you're running your environment in Azure, the Digital Crimes Unit works for you. The Digital Crimes Unit will investigate and assess any threats in your environment and help you remediate cybersecurity issues. And this team has been pretty busy. This is a pretty timely slide. We've been busy thwarting 8 separate attacks that have emanated from Russia on the midterm elections. The team has been busy building new technologies through the Microsoft Defending Democracy program to create hardened cyber capabilities for political organizations and think tanks. But we know that cybersecurity is not something that Microsoft can solve alone. And that's why we've been pushing the Global Tech Sector Accord, which maps the technology sector to pursuing 4 consistent goals and standards in the way that we collectively think about cybersecurity. And what started out as about 30 organizations has now grown to over 61 organizations focused on common standards for security to really move the world forward as it relates to that topic. The final topic was ethics. And a lot of our time is being spent right now not asking what technology can do, but really asking what technology should do. And we're spending time on AI ethics frameworks that we're working across the industry on, but we're also spending time on creating showcases like AI for Good to really demonstrate the power and the potential of this technology. This AI for Good is a 5-year commitment that we made 18 months ago, $115 million investment across 3 core pillars. And many of you in this room are participating in multiple pillars here. The first is AI for Earth, which is focused on environmental science, land use, water use, biomass protection. The second is AI for accessibility, focused on bringing the 1 billion people on the planet today that do not have access or have some sort of accessibility needs into the fold using AI technology. And the third is AI for humanitarian action that we announced just a few weeks ago at the United Nations General Assembly. So what I'd like to do here is run a quick video to give you a sense of this new third pillar, AI for humanitarian action. Let's roll the video.
Human rights situation often deteriorate very quickly, and the faster we can get the information and we can react to the situation, it can be a real game changer.
New technologies are advancing so rapidly, and technology companies can advise us on how best to use those technologies to protect and promote human rights.
Our objective is automatic damage mapping, because after the disaster, the government needs the damage map to carry out the effective rescue. If we can save the time to grasp the ground damage information, we are able to save a lot of life and facilities.
In a new partnership with the World Bank, United Nations, and tech industry partners, we'll be better able to predict when and where famine will occur.
Operation Smiles's vision really sinks in with what I feel is a fundamental human right.
What the volunteers do for the children may seem like a small thing, but they are able to change the lives of the families forever.
We're creating a chatbot-based experience for refugees coming out of the Syria conflict. The purpose is to have displaced youth find a way to discover and access learning materials. You can engage directly with the course content.
It's just the beginning of the impact that we hope to have with the tools at our disposal.
All right, some pretty good work there, especially in this room. Is Chris from Operation Smile here? Where's Chris? There he is. Just fantastic work from the Operation Smile, fantastic work from the NRC team working on the chatbot, and many other teams in this room. But the piece that I'm most proud of, perhaps, is the work that we're doing with the World Bank to create a mechanism that can predict famine ahead of our food insecurity, ahead of a crisis, and release funding ahead of that crisis. The reason I'm proud of this is because Google, Amazon, and Microsoft are all partnering together on a common core platform that the World Bank can use. And if we're going to crack the code on these problems, that type of collaboration is going to be needed more and more and more to move the world forward on these issues. And I'm very proud of the work that all three of those organizations are doing. So for NetHope members, what's practical about this? Well, first off, as many of you have already done, engage us on AI for Earth and AI for accessibility. We do have grants, Azure, as well as, most importantly, technical resources from Microsoft and through our partners to help you with your projects. On AI for humanitarian action, we have 4 NetHope projects going already. We're going to open up a process to understand what needs exist within this community. We're taking a more targeted approach, but want to engage deeply with NetHope specifically to make sure we've got the right AI projects moving forward for you. And importantly, everything that we build and can transfer and share, we will. So you can see here, Amnesty, United Way, Oxfam, all publishing their technologies to GitHub so that you in the room can leverage those, download those, use them as inspiration within your organization. So while AI has been a hot topic, this next topic is the hottest topic of the last couple of days and months, and feels like years at this point, based on the amount of work we've been doing on it. And to introduce this topic, I'd like to bring up 3 friends. The first is Dan Lamont, Eric Arnold, and Art. Come on up and grab a mic, and let me introduce them as they come up. You may know all 3 of these folks. Dan was the former founder and CEO of Round Corner. Good to see you. Good to see you. And now is the founder and CEO of Threshold.world, and we'll talk a little bit about what that is. Eric Arnold is the CTO, and along with being the CTO, he's the spiritual leader with Jane for the work that we do. So thank you. And Art is the COO for Team Rubicon, who is one of the world's largest disaster response organizations. But the cool thing about Art is he's a former Top Gun instructor, which I think is neat. So, let's start from here. We've been getting a ton of feedback from this audience, from partners, from institutional and private donors around the world. Eric, perhaps you can talk a little bit about the feedback that you've been hearing and frame the opportunity statement here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Justin. And we really have talked with thousands of nonprofits and partners at this stage to understand from you where you think we should focus our efforts. And I'm not going to drain the slide, but I will speak to 3 things specifically. One is a lack of open data standards. And this is something that has really slowed innovation, it's slowed data transparency, and it's slowed the ability to exchange data between organizations and between platforms. So we're committed to helping solve that problem. We've also been focusing and hearing from you around a lack of open data. So data is out there, you have data, your neighbor has data, but it's hard to get access to that information. And so how can we provide solutions that help aggregate information and help you drive insights in a standard way? And then finally, access to technology really isn't enough. You also need to think about how you're adopting that technology. And so we want to be able to make sure we're providing not just solutions, but also the ability to provide capacity building and technology resources that you can then bring learning into your organization to drive adoption of the solutions.
Yeah. So in direct response to a lot of that feedback that we've been getting, we have created the Dynamics 365 Nonprofit Accelerator. Now, to break down what this is, there are really three core components. The first component is a common data model. And this common data model, as Eric was highlighting, was designed with and designed for the sector, with input from many folks in this room, input from institutional donors, private donors. The common data model maps to standards like IATI to streamline reporting and insight. The common data model is rooted in the idea of program delivery and program insights and impact so that we all can start to get a better understanding of the efficacy and ultimately the impact of the programs that we're driving. And the common data model is designed to encourage interoperability, not just across Microsoft platforms, but across our partner platforms, so that we can start breaking down those silos of data that we see in every organization and across organizations. This is live, it is posted to GitHub, and is something that we'll continue to iterate with and iterate on with you as we continue to learn and evolve the model. The second key component are the nonprofit accelerators. And so these are sample apps, templates, and connectors that are connected into that common data model and are designed to help you deliver everything from program delivery, fundraising, constituent management, and essentially make it faster and easier for you to configure these solutions, and importantly, our partners to configure and deliver these solutions. Eric, before I leave this slide and talk about the third component, anything else you'd want to highlight on the overall architecture or approach?
Yeah, the goal here really for us is we wanted, one of the other things that we're hearing is you wanted Microsoft to really show commitment and to take a further step than we normally do. We're a partner-led organization. Anything we deliver, any solutions we deliver are typically implemented by our partners. But for nonprofit, and to Justin's earlier statement about trust, you told us that you want us to go just a little bit farther than we normally do in other industries. And so this investment, we are going farther, and we've had a chance to get buy-in on that from the top of the organization all the way to the bottom. Everybody's bought in. Nonprofit is an industry we're specifically supporting in Dynamics, and we're taking this step with partners and with our own first-party solutions to help it be easier for you to implement without over-customizing Dynamics.
Yeah, and it's incredible how enthusiastic and fired up the Dynamics team is. We actually have a few of them here with us. So I said three components. So one, common data model, two, accelerators. What's the third component? Well, it's the most important component probably. Let's get the slide to advance. For a platform company, and that is our great partners to help deliver awesome finished solutions that are customized and mapped to the environments that you have. And I'm so proud of the next couple of slides with just some awesome partners that we've been working with to bring these technologies together. And the first partner I'd highlight would be Blackbaud. And as you all know, Blackbaud's been in this business of building solutions for just about ever, about 30, 40 years in this sector. A year ago, we announced that we were going to form a tighter partnership by bringing their NXT solutions, their BBCRM solutions, onto the Azure cloud, integrating them more deeply with Office, and creating new functionalities like smart invoicing. And then a few weeks ago, I should say, at bbcon, we said we were going to take another step. And we announced the Integrated Cloud Initiative for Nonprofit, which was really about bringing the best-of-breed fundraising solutions that Blackbaud builds with the best-of-breed dynamic solutions onto a common architectural approach to deliver solutions for the sector. As part of that, we announced Nonprofit Resource Management. This is a platform that we're delivering in the spring-summer timeframe, working with a number of customers and organizations in this room that will help with complex resource management, logistics, and distribution scenarios, especially for those organizations that are in the global aid delivery space or in the food bank space that have sophisticated gift-in-kind and reverse logistics scenarios. This will be a platform built with that in mind, and that's just a first step in many steps that we're taking together between Microsoft and Blackbaud. A second key partner that you may not have seen in this way, us talk about them in this way, is Avanade. Now, Avanade was a joint venture launched, somebody said 20 years ago, but I remember when that was launched, and I've been at the company 20 years. So I guess it was 20 years ago. Avanade has grown substantially. They are now one of the leading system integrators for Microsoft, 34,000 people, 24 countries. Avanade is committed to building a social business. When we launched Tech for Social Impact, we had a call with Adam Warby, their CEO, and he was kind of committed from day one up and down in the organization. Avanade is now going to be a partner that will build and release the first native end-to-end Dynamics application built purpose for this sector, using the common data model, using those accelerators, and supporting everything from program management to M&E, all those scenarios that we've talked about. This is a huge step for Avanade. They have not done work this deep in any sector, manufacturing, telco, anywhere. They're doing it for nonprofit because they believe in it, and with their global delivery capability, we think we'll have real reach and real impact with this joint partnership with Avanade. Finally, there is Threshold.world. And Dan, I won't steal your thunder. Why don't you talk a little bit about why you created this organization and what we're going to do together?
Sure. Yeah. Good morning. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Nice job so far.
Okay, good. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
It's an honor to be here on stage with you, Justin, Eric, and Art, and in the room with all the NetHope members, many of which I've had the pleasure of working with in the past. And last but not least, the last 9 years of dedication to this space with a team that really worked to change the way people change the world. So, but the idea behind Threshold.world is that I believe we're at a threshold moment, that the world is at this threshold moment. And the decisions we make from now on are going to determine the future of life on the planet. And so technology's role in that, in my view, is just beginning. There's been a lot of work done, but it's just beginning. And so to boil all of that down, it's great we have all this data, it's great we have all these tools, it's great we have all these applications, but it's on us, whether we're in the technology space or the sector directly, to remember that behind every single record is a real story of a person, of an environment, a life that needs help from somewhere. So that's what we're going to address, and we're going to do that with some of the world's leading technology, and this story will play out over time.
Very good. And you know, Dan has been instrumental in helping us design, in fact, the common data model. Threshold.world will be a partner in helping us design all of the accelerator components that we've talked about. They'll also be a partner that will help other partners with their own design, and it's just such a pleasure and privilege to work with you. Dan's knowledge of this space is incredible. So, while Avanade, Blackbaud, and Threshold are key partners, we have many other partners that are signed up on this journey with us. From Classy, who you know is a born-in-the-cloud innovator, designing with us to ensure our systems interoperate, all the way out to end-to-end system integrators like Wipfli. And it's actually Wipfli and Team Rubicon that inspired a lot of this work. While we responded to all this feedback we were getting, we were so fired up about this scenario, this volunteer management scenario that the Wipfli team and the Team Rubicon team built, and that really animated our efforts. And you know, you've scaled from 4 people to 90,000 volunteers, right? And volunteer management is critical for you. So just tell us a little bit about your journey and what you hope to get from this platform.
Yeah, so obviously with that growth to see something really, it was from 8 to 90,000. So every one of these volunteers has this exquisite gift of time. They've got skills, experience, training, and desires. And what we had to be able to do is ensure that these people, when disaster struck, We were able to get the correct people with the right skills, the right experience, the right desires from the correct geographic location into the disaster zone to make sure that they could have the greatest outcomes and impacts ultimately in how we'd be measured for those survivors. And in doing that, they used the word customer earlier this morning. We view each of those volunteers as a customer, so we had to be able to understand if we were delivering on our proposition to them, to make sure that they were having an exquisite experience from the second they left the door, from their interactions with the communities and the survivors until they got back home. And then we also wanted to be able to do it better. And through this partnership, we've been able to unlock a lot of innovation and see around the corners to understand the realm of the possible. And the final note is this opportunity is not unique. This forum, this collection of incredible people is what will allow us collectively to do better around the world.
Very cool. Well, let's bring it to life. Let's roll the video, and then we'll wrap up. You guys stay up here, and we'll wrap up together. So let's go ahead and roll the video.
Hurricane Harvey was the most horrible hurricane that we have ever been through here in Houston. All of a sudden, my daughter Danielle comes running from the back bedroom. Mom, Dad, there's water. And I said, I know, sweetie, there's water. She says, no, Mom, there's water in the house. Once we opened the door, it just came in full force. We felt helpless. We couldn't do anything at that point. Looking back at your home and not knowing if it was going to be here when you returned, that was the hardest.
Houston is a 1 in 1,000-year disaster. It displaced thousands of people. It disrupted every element of a society, from communications to energy to food. And Team Rubicon had their small part.
Team Rubicon is a disaster response organization that utilizes the skill sets of veterans and first responders to rapidly deploy to disaster zones all throughout the world.
It started out after the Haiti earthquake with 8 individuals, and it's grown to almost 83,000 volunteers.
In order to be able to consistently rely on volunteers, you have to provide an amazing volunteer experience. If we take care of our volunteers, they're going to take care of the mission.
We had to create our own way of tracking and managing all these volunteers.
We were never satisfied, and so we've decided to build something from the ground up, really in an enterprise capacity with Microsoft.
Microsoft Dynamics 365 is our heartbeat. Azure, Office 365, and Teams, every one of those pieces comes together in an incredible manner.
The volunteer management system, it's like one-stop shopping. It's like one place where you can see all of the volunteers, you can see how active they are, you can see what events they've registered for.
You start to build a greater awareness and understanding of every component of the operation. The people, the costs, the time it takes to do a task, everything you do there, you can now start to measure and understand in a greater manner.
And now with the integration that Microsoft presented to us, we are able to cut out multiple steps, in fact, hours out of our day. And that equates to having more families in their homes. I've had many volunteers that have come to me in tears, realizing that some of these people have lost everything. And that's why they keep coming back. For love, for that feeling inside that we all seek. No greater feeling.
Well, right now you're sitting in my home, my new beautiful home. Team Rubicon has rebuilt for us, and I just could not be more grateful.
You have your hands and soul in a house that someone's going to live in for years and years and years, and you'll always remember that.
I was asking for some type of hope, that you're not in it alone. And Team Rubicon gave me that hope. They said, we're not going to leave you like this. We're going to get you back into your home. And that's why I call them my angels.
Love that video. Let's give it up for Team Rubicon. Nice job. So Eric, why don't you take us through what's next? And
I am stoked. So the data model is live. So 2 things about this. One, it is 38 entities and almost 700 attributes in a data dictionary with about 115 pages of documentation that's available on GitHub, open to anybody to use, to incorporate, to map to, whatever you want to use with it. We're also building that into the Dynamics schema. That's part of the reason the Dynamics engineering team is here today. We've been working through all that, finalizing it. They're here to learn from you as well. We'll be showing a sample application for what that looks like and walking through a scenario at a session I'll be leading at 1 o'clock today. We'll be putting a link to the Data Hub in the session notes, so you'll be able to go get it and play with it. I'll also, over time, now start blogging about the work that we're doing. Now that we're finally open and public about what we're doing with Dynamics, I'm going to be keeping everybody informed. It's likely we'll go through some quick iterations based on feedback from partners and all of you. We'll probably iterate that model pretty quickly over the next 4 weeks and then get into a cadence where we do a curated, regular release of updates to the model itself. And then lastly, we're paying attention to that adoption piece, and we're opening up an early adopter customer success program, opening it up first to NetHope members, and then opening up to every nonprofit. And so I'll talk about details of that in the session at 1 o'clock as well.
So attend the sessions. There's a lot of good sessions today as well as tomorrow. Find us in the hall. Find us wherever we may be throughout the next couple of days. Happy to talk about this. And last but not least, we are so privileged and honored to serve each of you every day as you work on some of the most important issues in the world. We look forward to continuing our partnership with the nonprofits in this room, but also with our technology partners within this room, and creating a greater degree of collaboration to move us all forward. Thank you.
Justin and the Microsoft team, thank you very much. I've had the pleasure of working with Microsoft's Humanitarian Systems Group since the days of Ray Ozzie. What it's been common across all of that is, in the common across the companies we just did this morning, is a sense of listening. What we're going to do now is take a coffee break, but do something a little bit different. We're going to open up the stage and bring the speakers back on for about 10, 15 minutes. You're welcome to go have the coffee break, but part of the problem solvers and part of the key element of what I've seen from these companies personally has been this process of listening and engaging. We're going to try and do that a bit now, so you're welcome to stay. If you're going to stay, come up a little bit towards the front so we can capture your questions. Thank you. Justin, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
John.
Yeah. John, yeah, absolutely.
Nicely done. Let's see, is Jed here? How you doing? Good. Jed, do we have you?
Yeah, we met last.
John Crow.
Pleasure.
Good to meet you.
Hey,
John.
Dan. Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
You as well.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I don't know.
It's true.
It's a small world.
All right. One thing I'd like to do is to see whether we have some questions here. Obviously, could I get AV and get a microphone? AV could you grab a microphone and bring on the speakers? Just bring the speakers. Good. Question.